Good evening. This is DebraVWilson. I'm home. I'm in Bradford. It is Sunday, and the date is the 28th of July, and that's 2019. Sorry. And the time is 1800 hours and 7 minutes, and that's GMT. Okay, so this is another one of my Stream of Consciousness podcast. I'm going to call it Bradford, what I'm thinking today. So I've been traveling from what is home, and then I'm going to talk about that and how I constructed home, how I think other people do. So I've been traveling since I was born and raised in Chicago and lived in Chicago unfettered for decades. 9/11, my world changed. I was living as of 2010, June of 2010, I was living in a high-rise building, which I quite love, with a very diverse community. The building was full of diversity. I left the building because of an FBI informant in there, who was one of the doormen, and whenever I came in or out of the building, I was constantly being questioned about what I thought about Jews, what I thought about Israel, if I was trying to destroy the state of Israel, what was I doing in the UK with MI5. It became, I complained of the law firm I had, got involved as well, but the FBI wouldn't remove them. 2017, when I was in Israel, so that I left in 2010, I found the situation degrading, that I was constantly being questioned when I went into my home. And in 2017, when I was in Israel, I called to say hello to some people in the building and found that in the spring of 2017 that this young man was still there. So, how I construct home. I was born in Chicago. It's what culturally, in all of its iterations, how culture manifests itself. I probably, for a time, it was the most familiar. When that incident happened to me, it was not just the sense of loss, it was then, what is my home? Who am I? Because I had rooted myself in Chicago, quite loved my identity as a Chicagoan, and I was a North Sider, and had been so for several years now, having been born on the south side of Chicago, today and every day. So it was always my plan to live in the United Kingdom, go to school, get my master's degree, and do consulting for the United Kingdom government around issues of national security. When I had to literally flee Chicago to get out of a situation again that I found completely degrading, that I was expected to constantly prove that I wasn't a terrorist, to the stated pointed checker of who's the terrorist, aka my doorman in this case, was just too degrading. So I don't know what I call home now. I actually don't know. I know in my heart I am a Chicagoan, but I'm a very analytical person, but I don't know if that's true. The person, it was all the more injurious to me because the person is foreign born, and he was constantly questioning or attempting to, because I refused to answer, on proving that I was a loyal American. Sorry, and then he was white, and I'm African American. It was more than I could provide. Traveling for me internationally doesn't change well, for me, it doesn't change what is home, but for me, it increases what is yours. So because of traveling domestically and internationally, parts of New York City, Midtown Manhattan, that's mine. Russell Square in London, England, that's mine. There's a small piece of Haifa in which I some Israeli Jews and some Arab Israelis. That's mine. There are pieces of the United Kingdom that I view as mine. Dundalk is mine. I have had a long challenge reconciling Dundalk in all of her complexities and what I experienced during the tail end of the Troubles. She's mine. Zermatt, Switzerland is mine. So I think that the more you see of the world and however you construct the world, and I apologize, you're going to hear noise in the background as people cleaning the hallway where I live. And so I think however you construct and your perspective on the world is what's yours and what's the other. I'm relatively new to Bradford, and Bradford, I think it's fair to say, doesn't have the best reputation here in the United Kingdom. When I told people I was moving to Bradford on a temporary basis, but nevertheless I was moving here, every friend I had said, no one said anything positive about it. It worked out best for me to move here, and I did. Today last week is the first time I think I said aloud, it's my home. At this moment, it's my home. I didn't do grocery shopping. I have to do grocery shopping for the week, which I'll do probably tomorrow. So tonight I went out and grabbed something for dinner. There's a large, diverse Muslim community here. And I went into a place to grab my dinner, get takeaway, and I remember thinking I don't have to hem and haw and ask if it's halal. Even when you're buying vegetables, if it's cooked, what did you cook it in? Did you saute it in wine? Did you do this? I didn't have to bother with that. The young people, everybody behind the counter was incredibly young. I'm 61. And they were incredibly young, more than half my age, and very respectful and very deferential and very polite. And all of the patrons were extremely polite. And I feel very deferential to my age. And I remembered thinking to myself when I was waiting for my order, the service, the food is excellent, the service is fine, but there was a bit of a wait, and I just remember feeling like, oh, yeah, this is my community, this is my neighborhood, this is where I've gone out to grab dinner from the takeaway. It's mine. I think it's important to constantly understand the space in which you live and what you contribute to that space, and well, for me, I should say, and how you connect with it, and why you connect with it the way in which you do. I think we all are an amalgamation of nature and nurture and how we turn out. I had the good fortune to be born to two gifted parents, and they had the means to see that I was educated very well in private schools in Chicago. My mother was quite an activist, and she also navigated very complex relationships with some police officers in the Chicago Police Department. My mother was Nation of Islam and a member of the Black Panthers, and she navigated transparent and public friendships with a couple of people from Chicago PD, the Chicago Police Department, as part of her activism. Both my parents were very complex thinkers. Because they had the means, they were middle class, to educate us well, feed us well. That's nurture. Nature, like I've said before in a previous podcast, I hit the jackpot. They were both intellectually gifted, very curious about the world, very outlooking towards the world, that this was the life we lived, but there was always the realization that there were multitudes of ways to experience what we call life. So I think I was born with a predisposition, and certainly raised with a predisposition, to always look beyond self and go, first of all, how do I define self? Why do I define self? And what does that mean in terms of how I engage in the world? And that I had always needed to find a way to engage in the world. So I'm here in Bradford. It will only be for on a temporary basis, but it is an ongoing story that I've had with the United Kingdom for over 30 years now. That's been complex, that's been messy, that's ongoing. I'm terribly excited about the prospect of doing more work here, but now from an academic basis perspective. My activism was always academically inclined, research inclined, but I'm looking forward to finding the right place to do my research project and the right supervisor. But right now, today, and at this time, I'm thinking about Bradford. And for a long time, I'm pausing because I want to get through this podcast without crying. For the first time in a long time, I'm actually able to say I have a home. I know the experience well of losing my home. When I was in my 50s, I suffered the loss of my home. It's been something that I've reconciled with for a decade, almost a decade now. I think it is actually almost a decade. It is. I lost my home in 2010. Sorry, I just stopped and started, so I might be a bit jagged, bumpy here. I lost my home in June of 2010 because of the FBI informant. And what I understand is an experience as a lack of oversight with the FBI, and I've been wandering around ever since. It's quite a long time. For the first time in a long time, I felt the sense of home. I felt the sense of community. I'll be moving again, but nevertheless, I still am pleased that that feeling is there, that the possibility existed. The other thing I want to do today in this podcast is I think it's important for me to start claiming self. When I first started visiting the United Kingdom after many years' absence, it was actually 7. I was disappointed in something MI5 did. I wrote them a series of emails. They have this website that you can contact them, and shared my disappointment in them and angst. They reached out to me and said, well, I'm paraphrasing, let's talk about it. I met with a young woman who was an MI5 officer. I was not at the place that I felt comfortable with what was said. I thought I couldn't come back to the country. So that was in 2011. It took me till 2018 to venture back here. And I was quite active in the civil society. So, this is, MI5 has MI5 is an internal spying apparatus here, the security service. I've put feelers out to a myriad of people to get a sense of if I was going to have a problem with them. Because of some of the emails I had sent them. Nothing threatening, but expressing my disappointment in their behavior towards me. I got the response back in a nutshell was, you met the criteria for coming in the country for immigration. They're not concerned with, the person I spoke to is a person I respect a great deal. I actually spoke to two people. One I knew, one was a brand new acquaintance, and they both asked me what I had done, and I told them about the emails I had sent in my 5, and they said two things, both of these minutes, two separate conversations, but you're going to have to try harder than that if you want to piss them off, and they're too busy. They're just too busy. So what is mine is the United Kingdom. What parts of it? What is mine is my concern about the way in which national security modeling is done here. What is mine is the right that I've always felt that I had to opine on the national security model here. So part of my journey is reclaiming in all of its nuance my right to opine without sending MI5 more emails, being critical of them from an academic perspective, writing and doing analytical studies about the way in which I understand the national security model, and an analysis from what it looks like, where it's going, and what it has been. The other journey of finding a sense of self was the space I found in Israel, of feminist activists, of women, predominantly women, Israeli women, Jewish, Arab women, Palestinian Israelis, who are questioning what Israel is, where she's going, the perpetual warring between Israelis and Palestinians, and a search for a peace agreement. That space that opened up for me was via the Shabak, which is Israel's internal spying agency. I was invited to come to Israel to explore, to see what I thought many, many years ago. Almost a decade, I guess it probably would be a decade ago. I actually ventured into the country for the first time in 2017, and then I went again in 2019, and I will travel again because I plan on doing research. And then in between those two countries was Canada. I met some people from the Canadian Security Intelligence Service. Canada has an outward-looking model in terms of its spying agency, CSIS, and they are Canadians. Part of their self-identity is that, unlike the Americans, they constantly say it, unlike the Americans, unlike America. They're constantly saying it, constantly. So one of the things, the outreach there was to encourage me to take a look at Canada and the research that's happening in Canada around national security. My politics are left of center. I am quite analytical, quite nuanced in my thinking. I suspect that's part of the reason why I've had people from, it's more than 3 countries, but the 3 countries I always mention, Alpha Order, Canada, Israel, and the United Kingdom. In the United Kingdom, my first exposure to the state security model personal exposure would be, as I mentioned before, SO15, which is Counterterrorism Police, that asked me to share my research with them, which I did, and I got a better understanding of the state, and that gave me therefore a better handle on my research and where I wanted to question the model and have a better understanding of the model. I felt I was better equipped to do that. So that's what I'm thinking today in Bradford. That's what I'm thinking today about Bradford and the anchoring, the anchor that it has been for me as I am working to relaunch and re-understand who I am with some major losses. I got through this without crying. So I have an upcoming trip to Ireland, the South, next week, which I will post about that. And before I break this winning streak and I start crying, this is DebraVWilson, and this is what I'm thinking today about Bradford. It has been, here I go, I think I'm gonna cry. It has been, she is the anchor. At this time and place that I'm calling home.